Hello, my name is Annie Blue. Today is July 28th, 2023, and this is our 15th Recovering Through Grief podcast. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. In his book, Fate and Destiny, The Two Agreements of the Soul, Michael Meade states, ancient notions of fate include an invisible thread woven through all things of the world and throughout all the events of time. Fate appears as the original web of life and as the fine thread that weaves each soul into the world of time and space at birth. Fate comes from the Latin word fata, which can mean a thing spoken by the gods at the beginning of each life. And fate carries the sense of fatality, the presence of death waiting at the end of the life journey. Meade shares that fate appears as whatever limits, restricts, or even imprisons us. Yet fate is the territory where we must go if we are going to awaken to our destiny. Dictionary.com describes fate as those outside forces establishing the preordained path of your life, no matter what you do. It states the many fate declarations offered, such as, you can't change your fate. Fate threw them together. Fighting your fate is an impossible battle. Fate can be cruel, and sometimes it is hard to accept your fate. It also states fate is outside your control. However, you can shape your destiny with your choices. Why? Because destiny is your future, coming from the Latin term destinare, which means intended or firmly established. Destiny hasn't already been determined. Therefore, the changes that you make will affect your destiny in your life. My next guest, Megan, is humble service to the loving divine and with devotion to living life as unconditional love. Megan has more than 10 years of dedicated study and practice of mystical and esoteric arts, divine, feminine, and archetypal embodiment, angel and shamanic work, multiple healing modalities, as well as experience exploring our subtle and cosmic worlds. Megan is living a life of embodied remembrance as she refines her wisdom to help bring support to others through her work and the threads of her life. Megan fought hard and has pushed beyond stress. She has learned through her bravery and her mother's bravery that nothing is impossible. Despite the bad times, she has witnessed heartbreak, struggles, adventure, enthusiasm, and sweet little stories. Numerous times she has called on her emergency strength reserves with the support of her grief-stricken adrenaline. Mother-daughter relationships are frequently complex and surprisingly complicated. According to Dr. Diane Schreier, they change over time and play an important role in our self-esteem, sense of who we are, and our ability to cope with our feelings. As you shall hear with Megan's story, she has given herself permission to grieve unspoken desires, motivations, and weaknesses that have all transpired in her life since such a young age. Yet the trials and obstacles of Megan's childhood became the drama through which her hidden gifts and inner goldenness of her soul first surface. Megan personifies how each soul comes to life bearing gifts. And for Megan, her gifts came forward very young in a meaningful way. Thank you so much for being here today, Megan.
Thank you for having me.
So can you please share with us your recovering through grief journey that began as early as 7 years old?
Yeah, I think that grief has always lived with me even before then, but it wasn't until I was older that I could recognize it as grief. I will never forget the day my mom sat me down and she would always bring donuts from her favorite bakery whenever she had news, whether it was good news or bad news. And I never knew which one it would be. But that morning she had told me that she was going to have back surgery, that, it was a problem that she had dealt with for so much of her life. And she finally found a doctor that felt like he could help her, and she was going to do it. And he assured her that in 2 weeks, she would be feeling much better, home, everything would be fine. And I remember just like this whoosh coming through me saying, no, I don't think you should. And she's like, what do you mean? Are you scared? All of those things of a young child. I was 7 at that time. And, mommy is going to be okay and you don't have to worry. And I said, no, mama, listen, I don't think you should do it. And she said, well, I'm going to. And it was just this feeling that I had that I couldn't shake. I knew that her choice would alter her life. I knew it would alter mine. I just knew it would be very different after she made that choice. And her surgery was in a few weeks' time. And almost every day I asked her not to do it. And when you asked me to do this, what was funny is that a memory came through that I had long since repressed, but it's hysterical considering the topic of our little sit together today. But it was in the fall, and so there were a lot of fairs. And we had went to a fall festival, and they have those little tents where fortune tellers are. And my mom's always been open to things. She especially loved angels. She got me into, she's the one who inspired me into doing angel work because she believed in them so much. But she went with my aunt to the fortune teller, and my cousin and I were outside the booth. And my mom, I overheard her ask, will I be all right? And the fortune teller, I'll never forget the look on her face. She said, has your daughter said anything to you? And she was like, what do you mean? Like, she got very defensive. My mother got very defensive. And she said, it's ultimately your choice, but if you don't have it, your life will be more pain-free than you believe it to be so. Because my mom was so riled with the physical pain that she was feeling and so desperate to get out of it. But the fortune teller told her, you will have less pain if you don't go. And my mom kind of hurried up and left, and she said, come on, but I wanted to go back to that lady. I wanted to know what else she had to say. And I snuck in and I said, that was my mom. My mom was watching somebody doing glass blowing, and I didn't care, and I wanted to go back to that tent, and I did. And she said, no matter what, you'll be okay, but hold on to your angels. And she told me to go be with my mom. And, that moment was so defining. And I almost think I felt the grief start there because somebody else recognized what I recognized that I couldn't describe. This panic of, please, no, don't do this. So my mother ended up having the surgery, and one surgery turned into 8 surgeries over a span of 7 years. And she had developed a staph infection that at the time, this was, more than 20 years ago now, wasn't well known, the hospital called the CDC, and my mom got sectioned off. And, what they did know is that it could spread very fast, and they didn't want anything to break out in the rest of the hospital. And so I watched my mother come to the edge of death multiple times. I even had her doctor kneel down on my level and say, "I am sorry. I promised your mother she'd be okay. I promised you in that moment in my heart," he said, "that everything would be okay. And I'm sorry I broke that promise." And so for the doctors to be waiting for her to die, of thinking that there was nothing more that they could do, and yet she wasn't dying. I was suspended in this echo of grief of, she's going to go. I see her going. She's coming back. She's going to go. She's coming back. And so I danced with grief. I danced with fear. I danced with life, and I understood how fickle it was. Are you going to take my mother? Are you going to leave me motherless or not? What are you going to do? I remember being angry and sad and worried. But that fortune teller that told me, hang on to my angels, I did. I hung onto them even for my mom when she felt like she was hopeless. She went from clutching her pendants and asking for pictures of her angel statues to not being able to even look at them because she was afraid, because she felt disappointed. And so I sat with them every day for her, for myself. And I feel like they pulled her from those depths multiple times. And I felt as though they were speaking to me to support that journey.
That's a big journey. That's a wild story. So if comfortable, will you elaborate on the details that go into dealing with infection disease control? I worked in hospitals at that time, probably earlier than that, and I remember staph infections. Disease control such as isolation precautions, personal protective equipment, limited patient visitation, hand hygiene, mouth, nose, eye protection, respiratory hygiene, cough etiquette, patient placement, patient care equipment, instruments and devices, care of the environment, textiles and laundry, safe injection practices, contact precautions, and patient transport. What was that like for you day after day after day, and at times continuing nowadays?
It depends on the lens I'm looking back through. On some days, I'm grateful because without the protective equipment, without the isolation, without the regulations, I couldn't be with my mother. And at that time, and now, even as we've gone through so much as a society in health crises and not knowing what's happening, I've always seen these tools as accessibility tools, not hindrances, because come hell or high water, I was going to be with my mother. So if you needed me to dress up like the man on the moon, I was going to. Oh. There was nothing that was going to stop me. And so it was scary. She was put in a far off corner of the infectious disease unit, and to go in, they asked you to leave all of your belongings in a different room, and they would have you tie your hair back and wear eye goggles and those things that go over your head, and ask you to change into different clothing and wear gloves. I think the hardest part was the gloves, not being able to really feel my mother. I think that was the hardest part, was wearing the gloves when time called for that. And it was just a very foreign environment to see all of the plastic sectioned off. And, during those 7 years, it wasn't just hospital stays. There were times when my mother got to come home, but my home got turned into a hospital. We had IV machines. We had, had to sterilize. We got rid of the rug, and we had, hard floors because we could keep it cleaner. And she had hospital beds and equipment there, and nurses coming all of the time. And we had to keep a part of our home sterile. We had to ask others to be respectful of that, to please, if you come in, to to put on different shoes. And, you know, and it was surprising to me how many people didn't want to. No, I'm fine. I'm not sick. It's like, it's not about that. It's more than that. So it was traumatic. It definitely put me in a state of heightened awareness in my life that I'm still working on resetting my nervous system from, most certainly, and trusting that things can be okay. But I really see it all in the end as a way that I got to see my mother. And, you know, not just for her, but also I grew up with my Nana as well, who had health trouble and who was immunocompromised. And thank goodness they're both still with me now. But it's been my whole life that we've had to take precautions, pre all of this stuff or not. And so it's not foreign to me. I truly do see it. And I encourage others to really look at it at a place of from compassion and say, yes, this might be frustrating for me, but this gives life to somebody else. So yeah.
Wow. What a helpful assimilation of really witnessing something like that and the experience. I like that idea of looking at it from a different place, because I've been working in hospitals. I've had to go through that too, so I have a taste of what that's like. But to be in the immersion that you were is quite a saga. So what has pulled you from the shadows? So much of this path has had to take a toll on your identity, as well as learning to accept your lack of control along the way. I deeply admire your strength of will, determination, perseverance, and sheer tenacity. And hearing all this, I want to send you a warm hug and blessings. This is a major, major journey at such a young age.
Yeah. I don't think anything has pulled me from the shadows. And the awareness of that has been a gift, because I stopped being afraid of the dark. I stopped being afraid of death. I stopped being afraid of the things I can't control. And that doesn't mean I don't have my human moments of why, or come on, or give me a break, or yes, I'm afraid. Why do I always have to walk with fear? And, you know, what comes to mind as really, I'm just going to go with this here, but when you asked me that, what comes to mind is at the times when my mother was home, I was never sure if she would be there when I got back from school. The nurse might say the infection's back, her fever's too high, she's not stable enough to be home. So very often I'd leave in the morning, and when I'd come back, Mom wouldn't be there. Why my Nana didn't tell me before I got in the door, I don't know, but I would come up the stairs and look for her in her bed, and she wouldn't be there. And I would always wonder, did they not tell me because she's dead? And they wanted to wait till I was home. And so I learned to ride that turning the corner of not quite knowing what's around the bend, and walking with courage. And I couldn't name it as courage before, but I can name it now. And really, truly, it's only a lesson I've learned recently, how courageous I actually am, and how courageous so many of us actually are, because I don't know who can't relate to being afraid. Life is scary. And so nothing pulled me from anywhere. It was what I traversed through. And it was the edge before you turn the corner. And I leave the shadow sometimes when I finally come around the corner and I say, okay, just what is in front of me now? But honestly, I think I made it through this far because I learned to live in the shadows and admire the light and see how you can exist without both.
It's beautiful to have that kind of profound awakening and comprehension and assimilation again. It's like, so I love that you're tapping into your courage as well as all of us that have such supreme courage. It's nice to have that echoed back to all of us. How do you respond to these statements? Grief is the healing. After loss, we open our eyes to a world that in no way resembles the world we once knew. In this new world, Grief is how we come to understand who we are, how we feel, and how we survive in this new world.
Mm. What I hear from that is grief is one of the many catalysts that we face in life that propel us. It's a transitioner, and it's healing in a way because we have no choice. If grief graces us, if it enters into our life, we cannot turn it away. It lands and it stays. It comes with death. It comes in change of life. I went from having a version of my mother to having to know this other woman and having to have her learn how to be a mother when she really can't even care for herself. What does life mean for me now? It brought on so many things of what will my life look like? That is the main piece of what you said. After loss, we open our eyes to a world that is in no way resembling the one we once knew. And that's true. Grief is a new lens, a new dimension. It's a portal we walk through, and we don't know where we're going to end up on the other side, but we know we have no choice. And I think that the dance between grief and death, not even just literal death, but metaphysical, metaphorical deaths, a shamanic death, one of the 10,000 times that we'll die in our lifetimes. It's grief is not a place where we get to lay anything down before we walk through the door. Grief is where all of a sudden everything piles onto us and we're heavier and we know more. And the less that we know carries more weight. The not knowing carries more weight than even what we do. So really, that's a powerful statement. And I would encourage anyone to really sit with that we have to look with new eyes after grief, because we are not the same.
It really is in a mere instance where, I've just read so many different chronicles from people that have experienced deep loss, and I think that one's always an initial big review piece, because there's so many that wish they could turn back a clock,
Mm-hmm.
and grief it is your friend. It still is your friend. So would you look at grief as a companion through the memories and bonds that live in your grief that are both painful and positive?
I would look at grief as an initiator. I would look at it as a portal, as another layer of life, as another dimensional reality that gets overlaid onto different facets of our existence throughout our time here. So is it a companion for me personally? I wouldn't say that grief is a companion, but grief is an initiator, a gatekeeper at a door, to life that is going to change once you walk through, and you must walk through when you have grief. And then after you walk through the door, after you pass the initiator standing at the gate, it just becomes another air and current of life that stays with you. You breathe it, you walk it, you feel it. It doesn't become you any more than air becomes you. And yet it's vital to your existence now, because it carried so much. It carries so much. And in a way, it also moves you forward. So I would say that for me, grief is an initiator, a portal, and also it sounds like it shouldn't be, but almost like something that carries you through, a current, a necessity. It sustains you in a way.
Yeah, like the poem Footsteps, where, the reason you didn't see your footsteps is I was carrying you through. And that's the picture that came when you just said that.
Yeah.
You have shared the great danger and brush. Well, no, you haven't. So I would, if you feel comfortable sharing that story, the danger and brush with death you experienced with your mother, especially the one beautiful story. Do you recall any other childhood memories other than this horrendous experience where your soul tried to awaken you and reveal its inner pattern, a deep awakening to the way you were intended to live?
Yeah. So there were many times where my mother came on the edge of death. And there are two instances actually that I'll share that are important, I feel. And the first would be, I think it was after the third surgery of them trying to clean up the infection. And they would just constantly reopen the same wound to attempt to control the infection because it was eating away at her bones and it was spreading too fast and it was terrible. So honestly, most of the surgery was to try to contain the infection. But there was one day my Nana was talking to the nurses. So I went in before them. And I think the doctor was going to come talk to my Nana. So I went to go spend time with my mom. And often she was unconscious or in a very dazed state. So we couldn't talk, but I'd lay with her. But I walked in that day and she was just a different kind of unconscious to me. And her skin was gray and her lips were blue and they were turning purple and they were also fading to gray. And it looked like a being who was dying, and I could feel that she was dying. And in the more wakeful moments when she was lucid, my mom and I would always talk about this one nurse in particular who was the kindest and sweetest. And you get a whole array of personalities when you're in the hospital, and some nurses are blessings and some were just grateful that they can help us. But we were there for so long that you made connections with people. But there was this one woman, and I don't remember her name. My mother doesn't remember her name, but she wore an angel pin. And so we called her the Angel Lady. And as a child, I could see very many different things, fairies, angels, lots of things on multidimensional planes. But this one, that angel lady, that nurse, always seemed to have a lot of angels around her, I noticed. And I always figured, well, that's why she gives my mom so much comfort. But I just remember seeing my mom in such a vulnerable state, and I truly believe she's dying. And I just laid over her. I felt like God had said to me, just lay on her and we are with you. And I just, in my inner sight, I remember seeing these swirls of color, this golden sheen, these white feathers, these white flashes of light, these intense beings that had many geometries around them and different tones playing. And the angel lady walked in and she looked at me and she looked at the machines that had started to beep, and she laid over me while I was laying on top of my mother, and she said, just keep going. We're here. And I don't know how long we were there. It felt like I got plucked out of time, but I knew that this was what needed to happen for my mother. And I felt like I could see my mother from different points of the room. Her consciousness wasn't in her body. And I saw the light escort her back into her being. And afterwards, I felt my mother start breathing more deeply. And other nurses were coming in at the time. And the angel lady, she just got up and she nodded at me and she touched my shoulder and she touched my mother's shoulder and she left, and I never saw her again. So a part of me truly does believe that she was an angel in form and she did her job and she left. So I really believe that she brought my mother back with me. And yeah, that catalyzed something in me which leads into this next part, which really showed me the power that I had, not necessarily to bring someone back from the dead or whatever, but this power of belief that it is important to watch out for your family, to watch out for yourself, to trust your instincts, that, being your own, sovereign representative of self and well-being is very important. I gained that day. And a few years later, she was in a different hospital at that time, but she had called home and she said, I'm dying, come get me. So my Nana rushed me in the car and we drove to the hospital. We were trying to call doctors. We didn't have a cell phone then. So we just tried to call the hospital before we left and no one would listen. So we ran. And my mother wasn't in her room. And I saw that angel lady again. And she said, scream. And so I just sat in the middle of the nurse's station screaming, where is my mother? Where is my mother? Where is my mother? And my Nana's going around like crazy opening doors. And they put my mother in a utility closet. And my mom had had surgery a few days prior, and she was saying she was in pain, and the doctors were just saying, well, yes, because you had surgery. And my mother was trying to say, I'm dying. This pain is different. And that angel lady just told me to keep screaming until we found her. And then finally, one nurse was like, what is going on? And my Nana had said, she says she's in pain. She cannot breathe. Something is wrong. She had multiple blood clots in her lungs, and she needed intervention, or she was, again, very close to dying. And so, you know, that was a miracle to me, not just because the angel lady showed up again, but because I found it in myself. And my Nana felt the current to, you have to get attention to things that are important to you. You are an active participant, not only in your life, but in others' lives. And it's important to trust when someone says something isn't right. And we so often overlook that, and we choose not to understand. And so that's another moment that really, you know, defined my life of what it's like to embody courage in this current of life that flows through you. When life is meant to be lived, it's going to move you. And it moved me that day.
Oh, that's just amazing. And also just the fact that you listened so beautifully and followed through on it. Oh my gosh. So how is your mom today? Is it still the same infection that she carries within her from that initial time?
You know, this year we had another almost brush with death with my mom. I again watched her turn gray and come very close, and we were within hours of her death. And thankfully I had another moment where I listened and she survived. So no, it is not necessarily the same infection, but my mother struggles with various different points of disability. And so it's just getting to the point of trying to manage how her body is now. But she had a very bad infection, and it turned into sepsis. And so my mom is again on another recovery. And what's beautiful, what I would share, is seeing how she handles it now.
Wow.
It was very scary. And, you know, the doctor said, just take her home, give her medicine, she'll be okay. I don't know, something just didn't sit right. We went home and she wasn't okay, and she wasn't okay. And my fiance was like, just take a nap. It's okay. Take a 20-minute nap. We'll go check on her. And, you know, I saw my mom dancing, and we were in different rooms, different parts of the house. And I'm like, why are you dancing, mommy? And she was just dancing. And I'm like, does that mean you're going to be okay? And she's not answering me, you know, on this etheric plane. And she's just dancing. And I'm like, okay. And I tell my fiance, and he's like, okay, you definitely need to rest. And but a little bit later, she appeared to me again. She was not dancing, and she didn't look well. And I remember asking her, do you need help? Do you need to go to the hospital now? And she just nodded her head yes. So I ran upstairs and I called, you know, 911, and we went. And so thank God she is recovered to the point that she has now, and I believe she will be okay. But we were able to have that conversation afterwards when she got her mind back, when she realized what happened. She said to me one day when I was, you know, fixing her bandage, she said, Megan, I think I was going to die. I think I was dying. And she had shared how she saw herself from different points of the room, and how she could feel like she was going to leave, but she just wanted to reach for me. And she said, I knew you'd listen. And she said, you know, I think I really was dying, and I don't think all of me came back. Is that okay? And I said, yes, it's okay, because what's meant to go will go. And you, this part of you was meant to stay. And so we've been figuring it out together over these last several months of what life means for her now. So again, she also stepped through grief and grieving the part of her that she feels has died, and grieving the life that she didn't get to live that she wanted to. And so we're both figuring it out now.
Wow. I'm glad that she made it through that.
Yes.
So what do you think of the mystic view that each soul born is in the hands of fate before ever being in human arms?
Mm. Oh, I take a deep breath with this one. So I say this all with compassion, but if I speak with transparency, I truly believe that in some way we all choose our lives. That before we are born, everything, even the terrible things, even the things that were forced upon us, these horrors, I believe that before we are born, we sit down with the most enlightened version of ourselves. So we'll say that that's our higher self, our true soul embodiment self. And we sit down with God, creator, this, whatever you would like to call, what created all. And we talk about what we need to do this life and what we don't. And I think that a goal was set, or multiple goals, multiple possibilities. I want to learn unconditional love. I want to triumph over health issues. I want to experience culture, whatever it is that your soul said and that soul speak, that means something to your soul. And no, my human consciousness would not choose to go through anything I went through in life. My human consciousness would absolutely say no. My human consciousness now is actively trying to transcend what it is that I want to learn, because I'm done with that lesson now. I feel as though I've learned enough. So in a way, yes, I do believe we chose everything, every painful nook and cranny of life before we were born. But I also believe that we can live beyond that and have our own personal ascension journeys and take that and turn it into something else. I don't even want to say something more beautiful. You could turn it into something more terrible. but we have, our hand in that magical pot. But yes, the pot was set before we were able to fill it.
I call it the menu.
Mm-hmm.
And I can almost see myself when I do it, when I think of doing it, and it's almost like I was given some choices. Okay, this is something you're going to go through, and you can go through it in this way or this way. And it's like, I don't want that way. I'll do this way. Like, even with my different remembrances of occasions like that, where I felt connected to that menu and my choice in it. It's just kind of cute sometimes to go, wow, I think I would have thought differently and done the other one.
Yeah.
So there's a mythic story of women called the Fates, who, according to Michael Meade, were the arbiters of our chance at life and were the harbingers of death as well. The three most noted were called, I may mispronounce these two, Clotho, the spinner who first pulls into existence the invisible thread that secretly runs through each person's life, Lachesis, the disposer of lots in life, who gave each person positive and negative characteristics and assigned each a potential destiny, and Atropos, she who cannot be turned, who cuts one's life thread when the end of life has been reached. To resist one's fate could bring forth Nemesis, a fierce dark spirit, who could cancel all good fortune and bring in its place dire retribution. In your research and understanding, Megan, you have learned there are more than three to this myth. Please share all you are guided to about how these weavers extraordinaire and divine storytellers set the plot line of each life, dressing our souls in the thread of fate and destiny.
Yeah. A topic I love so much and so close to my heart. So Clotho, Achesis, and Atropos what you speak of, that's where we usually turn to when we think of the fates, you know, that Greek mythos. But there are many different versions of the fates throughout our cultures, and many different symbolisms that just point towards this concept of fate or destiny. So I feel like one of the most, at least for me, palpable experiences that feel so tangible is when we look to Norse mythology and we look into the Norns, their version of the fates, where it's written in different texts. Sometimes they're referred to threefold beings, you know, three individuals that took form in some way, but there are also others where they recognize that there are many Norns. They do not know how many fates there are, but they're usually women. And we don't know how many there are. And I think that, to me, in my body and my research, considering especially that we see the fates show up in even Hinduism, and some people even feel as though that the three Marys were embodiments of the fates, and many more. There's even Korean deities that represent fate, but she only is one goddess in herself. That because for as long as creation has existed, where have we come from? Why are we here? The concept of destiny has always been in question. The concept of fate has always also been in question. And so in Norse mythology, it feels very resonant to me that there would be many Norns, there would be many fates that show up throughout time and timelessness that exist. Some people even believe that any oracle, true oracle, is indeed also a fate or connected to them. And so what's important to note about the fates, regardless of where we look at them in culture, is that even other gods were at the mercy of them, that the fates even spun God's reality, the gods that we had here on earth and probably in other places, these beings that were revered as gods or titans or these, you know, giant mythical figures that held importance and were worshipped. They had to answer to the fates. Their destinies were still spun by them. And there's also an aspect to that where that speaks to, were there really any beings at all? Or were people trying to put a different name to God? Were they trying to explain their creation further? Which is really the part of the mythos that I've always been curious in, that people are trying to tap into and also pump things into this collective consciousness of something that's a bit more explainable than the ineffable. That at least there are things there that are tangible, that we can talk to, whether or not they'll listen to us or not. That there's a connection to through these oracles or through other gods that would deliver messages to the fates. I feel like, you know, throughout humanity, the concept of destiny, the concept of, was this right for me? Did I make the right choice? Do I have purpose? Do I have meaning? I feel like those things stemmed from the myths of the different iterations of the fates. But I still do believe that they are alive in a tangible consciousness that probably, sure, in some form took into form on our planet and in other times. Another thing that's important for me to note is that some people believe that the fates were simply oracles. It's not really that they decided your fate. Some believed that they could just tell you your destiny, but they were known to be very vague, and that would be very frustrating. But true oracles really aren't there to tell you anything. They're there to support you in the unfolding. They're there for you to ask the question and not there to answer it. They're there to encourage you to live your answer. And so there's many different facets, whether they're the gods of gods, whether they're primordial beings, whether they're God themselves, whether they were just oracles or wise women in the community, whether they're these echoes. It really does, people latch on to them because they want to know.
It's absolutely beautiful. And one of those answers that I want to go back and listen to more than once, because there's just so much in there to contemplate and to really look at, and really kind of glean into, what each of us sees with something like this, to really look at this in such a more expanded and amplified way. So absolute thank you for that. That was beautiful. So please respond to these statements by Michael Meade. Without a sense of fate, life seems more random and accidental, and we tend to feel less purposeful, less convinced that our souls could lead us somewhere.
Mm. For me, fate is the backbone. It is an unfathomable trust. It is living trust. It is living faith that, because again, going back to my personal beliefs of my higher self chose something. I chose something. I'm taking position in that. I'm taking, radical responsibility in that. It brings me to the backbone of trust that myself, the divine, would not do anything to ultimately harm me. So for me, it is the backbone. It's a foundation that I lean to when I don't understand, when I wish it wasn't so, when I have no idea. And so life, I don't know if it would seem more random or accidental. I will say that what's funny to me, I love musing with my partner and how he sees fate and destiny. And so to contrast, while I don't really feel anything from fate, he feels like destiny is not really there, and that certain things might be put in our path, but everything else is simply just open and there's no ultimate end. And, to achieve or to work through, nothing happens exactly for a reason. God doesn't care about you that much. God loved you enough to create you, and then we send you on your way. Right? So it's a little bit different than mine, but he doesn't feel a lack of purpose. He feels freedom. So really, it's sometimes I think people might feel a little unheld because they don't feel that backbone that I feel, or the equivalent of it in somebody else. So really, fate itself, I feel like, is truly a collective consciousness that is an oracle that you can decode things for yourself. So if you have any strong opinions about fate or destiny, whether it's real or not, or how it interacts, I would really encourage people to sit down just with the consciousness of fate and say, what does it mean for you? Does it provide a backbone? Does it inspire trust? Does it give you fear? How can we transcend that fear? How can we feel it all and rise into a sense of love? That even if we don't have control, that it doesn't mean we cannot enjoy. So whatever it is for you, I really always encourage people to sit down with their relationship with the concept of fate and destiny and see how it interacts in their lives, because the way you are perceiving it will be a way that it gets mirrored back to you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly why I really wanted to do this today, because I just think it's so impactful. And it's neat to hear that you had that level of a depth of discussion with your partner. That makes me glad that it brought that up for you guys to go ahead and do that. And I hope that others that listen to this will choose to do that too. It would be fun to be in a group and see what propagates, if somebody brings this up as conversation. So another statement is, fate appears when life needs to change and in the mistakes that turn out to be fortunate and purposeful.
It definitely appears similarly, I think, to grief, right? That portal that I spoke to, kind of, you have to walk through it. And so sometimes fate does intervene, right? Or God intervenes, whatever you want to call it. I see them truly as a very similar essence being or facet of existence. So I find that we often look towards things like fate, destiny, or God and belief when something major happens, either when something majorly good happens or something majorly bad happens, and we just forget about it in between.
I agree.
Yeah. So fate, I do think, comes when we kind of need to be hit over the head with a 2x4, so to speak. But it doesn't come, it's planned, right? Because can we believe in fate and destiny without believing that we're living our destiny? So that's a question that we have to answer for ourselves. But for me, hearing it phrased like that is kind of funny. Well, does it come or is it happening, right? Mm-hmm. So really that brings more questions than possibly answers.
Which is great, because my sense is that it's one of those that's going to be evolving, where it's going to be changed depending upon where you are and what's happening within your journey. So right. That's why it's kind of a neat statement to keep looking at and peering into. Another statement: denying the sense of inherent limitations set by fate also means denying the essential uniqueness of one's soul, as the territory of fate is where we must go to awaken our purpose in life.
What comes to my mind with that statement is the sentiment of presence, of truly embodying each and every moment. And I say that because, if we go back to the fates themselves, each of them represents something different. So in Norse mythology, Uther or word would be representative of the past. And Verandi, she represents what's coming into being, and Skuld is what will be. And what is the most important with each one of those topics? And I would summarize that description with whatever has been or will be currently is. It's all happening at the same time. And, the past is threading through into the future, and it's creating the future, and the future is feeding back, helping the presentness know where to go. All of these fun ways to word how time really is or isn't. And the key to navigate that is presence, is being aware of what is here and real now, which I know sounds like a trope at this point, because people say be aware of the now and be present now. But truly, if you see something as a limitation, sit with the limitation. If you feel as though that you are denying something because of a limitation, that you are denying the uniqueness of your soul because of the limitations, why are we asking that? To me, that means a lack of presence with self. And I would really say that through your presence is what will awaken your purpose in life, and that fate is a supporter in your journey of that.
I love the essence of presence. I incorporate it when I remember. But it is amazing how, when I come back to that point, how just balanced everything gets, no matter what's going on around me. So I can appreciate that as your response with what this is bringing up. The last statement is: the paradoxical nature of fate includes both the sense of the inevitable and the shock of the unexpected.
That one's fun. That one feels super tingly and alive. And really what that reminds me of is, if I were to bare bones the concept of fate, it's simply that you came into existence, and one day your existence will transition over into something else. And that is the reality of it. And everything in between are reminders of your connection to that innate cycle of that, sense of spiral in nature, that everything that was or will be already is and will come again, and to and from. And so sure, it's paradoxical, and yes, it certainly does include a sense of inevitable and the shock of the unexpected. It's there, I think, it's my sense that it's there to help reconnect you and reorient you to your stream of life. That when we get those awakenings, when we get those aha moments, when we get those oh no moments, it's this is where I think destiny and predestined, support is really beautiful. Somewhere in creation, something new that you needed that little node to stop, that we can't just run along the line, that, this one will be a light node that, whoa, enlightens and illuminates you. And this one will kind of stop you and feel like a wall because we might need to sit and think and relax. So that's how I see that statement, is that fate and life is just here to really support you. And so again, to that backbone kind of thing, that I trust that my higher self had my back, that it has my back, that I have my back, that I have my true best interests in life, that the universe is genuinely conspiring for my benefit. Those essences run along that thread of life that we can call fate.
So beautiful, such a beautiful image to even put that into a visual perspective. Of just, I guess the feeling of it is just serenity and glory, actually, one glory. So meat shares our longings for home, our desire for awakening to the desire hidden within the soul from the beginning. Destiny is the most hidden aspect of one's life. At the same time, it involves one's original destination. Fate ties us to the world and keeps us within it. Destiny calls us to a divine errand, set deeply within us. Wherever we brush against the limitations of our fate, we also stand near the doors of our destiny. Please share your knowledge of what the threads of destiny allow us to find.
Yeah, it really speaks to the image that started just prior with the previous statement of, there's a thread leading along, and it allows us to have these amazing moments in our life that end up being really tangible and important. When we follow ourselves, really, when we live life. So, I love romanticizing human life. I know a lot of, especially spiritual people, want to go up and over and, divine ascended beings. And sure, that's a beautiful experience to meet that divine and want to achieve that again. But I think that our humanity is divine, that divinity and humanity are not separate. They're one and the same. It is just the divine expressing itself in a different way than another version of the divine. Yes. And so if we follow our life, if we pay attention, if we are in presence, and we're not always going to be perfect and in presence all of the time, but if we take those small moments of, wow, that really meant something to me, or wow, that's really beautiful, or wow, that was really hard. I think those are the things that we should be following, those points of awareness, because that's what it is. We suddenly became aware of something, of how beautiful that was, of how grief-stricken we were. And so again, destiny and fate, I really like that the way that was put, that destiny calls us to a divine errand set deeply within us. That I agree to. That's, again, that kind of goal that we set before we were born. These are the 3 things I'd like to learn, and if I at least get half of one, I'd be happy, right? So that's beautiful. That's that calling. That's what. But what we sometimes forget is that, yes, all of the grime and guck and weird of our life is bringing us to that. So truly, the knowledge that I feel that I have learned is that the thread of destiny is simply just the corresponding day-to-day of our life, the awareness of, and to take note of those times where we are aware, and really, again, sitting with how those things made us feel, and also dreaming into what could be, because we're active participants in our life. So if we don't like something, I'd love to be able to say, then just change it. But I understand the realities of the world. But we can still interact with it differently within ourselves and create a new dreamscape. So yeah.
And being really the essence of creatrix.
Yes.
You are creative beings, and there's just so much to everything we are agreeing with and integrating and in transmuting and transcending, and sometimes being in for long periods of time. So it's just really, really beautiful to look at that. So is destiny located in the fateful issues and the darkest areas that most of us try to avoid, outwit, or outrun?
It can be. Again, it can be. It interacts with you. Life interacts with you. We're not just left to the wayside. I truly believe that, creation is working with us and loves us and wants us to be whatever it is that we want to be, not just the best for us. I feel like creation wants to empower us enough and help us shine light on our sovereignty to be whatever it is that we want to be. And you will learn your lesson as it comes to fruition, or as it doesn't. So again, back to, I feel like people often really only look towards fate or God or faith or anything like that when a good thing or a bad thing happens. But I think it's located in all of the in-betweens.
It's like the cock or the grout between the tiles. Yeah. That's beautiful. What is the outcome of attempting to escape one's fate? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I feel like if someone were to word or if it would be an accurate description of what someone's doing, I would say that you're not escaping fate. You're not trying to do that. You're trying to not live life. I would say that you are trying to avoid presence, flow, or that you have a desire to overcome something. And does that not feel resistant? Does that truly feel comfortable? So really, an outcome of escaping one's fate, if we put it that way, I would imagine having a feeling of discontent, of really not being at ease, of not feeling the positive side of a flow. Because you can run, you're still making headway. I get it, but what are you running to? Why are you running? And could possibly your need to outrun fate be a part of your purpose? What does it really mean? What does that mean for you? What does escaping fate mean? Why do you want to escape fate? Is it because you want to prove you can do it yourself? Well, then, my love, you need to realize that you are capable. So then I would ask you to possibly try to change your path of thinking to outrunning fate and saying, I can do it all, to simply saying, I can do it.
Beautiful. It takes me back to some of the instances where I found myself in what I would believe I was trying to avoid or outwit fate. And part of it for me was because of everything that I'd witnessed, I had no clue how to. Like, I mean, I know it's innate within us. I believe and trust it's innate within us. But there were times when I really, because I'd become such a chameleon to everything I was a part of and was in fight or flight in such high degrees, that I really couldn't find my way in it. And I remember explaining it to people that it's not that I didn't want to reconnect to you and find a way back to our relationship. It's just that I had no clue how to do it. Like, I was just immersed in that experience of fate, and really was almost like stagnant to the point of where I really wasn't breathing. It was interesting to hear that come out of me, but that's the thoughts that came up when you were speaking to that. So do you believe we each have an appointment with destiny, but must settle the disappointments of fate to arrive there?
Mm. I'm amazing myself really when I'm hearing this, and what I feel emerges as response, and how in my being I'm always replacing fate with life. So really, even in this conversation, I'm learning how much my beingness wants to intertwine simple life into fate and destiny, and the weight of that and the simplicity of that at the same time. So do we each have an appointment with destiny but have to settle the disappointments of fate? Sure, in essence, yes. We have to go through life and persevere. And I actually, you know, feel as though in this context, when it says the disappointment of fate, it kind of reminds me of that essence of grief doesn't allow you to not walk through the door, but fate does allow you to turn away.
That's the point.
And so I don't think there's ever a wrong answer, whether you walk through or you turn away, or even with what you so beautifully and vulnerably shared. At some point, I realized this was the reason. You know, really, we have an appointment with awareness. We have an appointment with consciousness. I feel like at some point in our life, there will be a realization of X, Y, or Z, or X, Y, and Z, you know. So in a way, yes, it's the action of just participating in the stream of life, and being willing to hold self-compassion and understand how much sovereignty we have. We have so much sovereignty, we can turn around on fate and walk the other way.
Yes, yes. Great choice. What was I thinking of that? I can't find it, but I was thinking of when you were speaking about this. I know the one person I was listening to recently speaks about how we have a universe of kindness, and we have a universe of joy, and we have universes within us. So in speaking to an appointment with destiny, we have appointments with all those things.
Yeah.
Which is really beautiful to embrace. So ironically, awakening to the eternal speaking through us, described as being weird, is our divine connection coming through. So it is often how there's a lot of diatribe out there about how spirituality can be weird. Much of the work you do with clients speaks to this, Megan. Would love for you to share your gifts and offerings.
Yeah. I love the weird. I think it's beautiful to be weird. I think that really when we look at life and everything that we've been through, it's really awe-inspiring. It's like how it's really miraculous. And that's a part of what I try to weave into my work with others, regardless of what they're doing. So there's three main things that I tend to do with others. And it depends on their resonance and what they're ready for. So the first thing that I do that is offer oracle work. People come to me with questions and we explore. It's not fortune telling, it's not fate telling, it's sitting truly with an oracle. It's sitting in the sphere and the consciousness of oracle, of what is present here and why are we looking at what we're looking at. And that can bring a lot of comfort to others, and a lot of support tends to come in, not to necessarily give answers, but to give that sort of soul nourishment that's needed. Mm-hmm. Another step from that is more like a soul sit, where I've come to realize that it's more intuitive counsel than anything else, where if we have a query, or if we have a question, or if we have a rite of passage that we want to presence, we actively work with that and help. Instead of having things come in from the outside, like with oracle work, I'm really helping facilitate others have more of a static free channel with their higher selves. Mm-hmm. And so it's a beautiful mirroring of what they might need and what wisdom is coming through them in this moment, and working with that because that consciousness is alive. And then finally, I do more shamanic journeying, where we often touch on some of the strangest of things, whether it's cosmic or earthly or fairy realms or what have you. And it's just a soul mirroring journey for what's alive and real in the moment, and really attuning ourselves to the appropriate frequencies that we need at that time. And it's all intuitively guided and channeled. So it's very different for every being.
Well, I can speak for it and vouch for it because I've gotten to do client work with you, and I came away, I would call it upcharged, and also seeing myself in some more new eyes, which is what we can best hope for. And and each time we're able to do that, we fall more in love with ourselves, because we want to love ourselves because we're the bomb, we're the best.
Yeah.
So where does the wisdom factor, or where does wisdom factor in for you in terms of fate and destiny and love?
Wisdom inspires, again, the concept of sovereignty and the essence of humility. Again, I am truly on a lifelong discovery of what this all means to me in every single moment. And this time with you has shown me that fate and destiny is so interwoven with life itself that can it truly be separate. And so that is an example of wisdom, acknowledging that for everything that I thought before this moment, there is a yes, and also this now that I feel. And so it is important for us to keep I don't even want to say keep our feet on the ground, because sometimes you need to float off. But, it's important to have your own internal center, your own attunement to your heart, that regardless of what anybody else says truly is, you have to take that into yourself. And a part of it is simply just critical thinking, right? How we need to gain that skill back as a society and have the courage to do that, and thinking, that whatever arises within me could be correct or could sustain me for this time. So it's belief in yourself, the understanding that we are sovereign, and, being able to embody the humility that sometimes we don't have control in this moment, or we chose at some point to give away control. So wisdom is understanding the realness of what's here now.
Beautiful answer. Again, that's why I love getting to do these, because it's like my guides are wanting me to change this name and add the word chronicles to it, because I feel like this isn't just for us. This is reaching in ways we can't even fathom, to not just here, to all these support beings like the fates or the angels, who are also highly, supportive in our efforts to embrace our creativity and our abilities. So that's what was coming up. Mead states that each family has its own share of fateful themes and interwoven stories that are passed down along with the DNA sewn, not the body cells. Each family harbors particular issues and shared qualities that pull everyone together when they are not pulling everyone apart. Another interrelationship between our gifts and wounds. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really intense feeling, this intense dance. And, I would agree to a large sum of that. Because again, if I lean back on my own beliefs, I do think that we chose our lives and the people in them and how we interact. And that goes especially for our family, chosen or not, whoever we consider family, whoever we consider that had an impact on our lives. And we might not even know if we're that person to somebody else. And I would say, it doesn't escape me that I grew up mostly without a father, and I grew up with my mother and my Nana and myself. And so that mirrored in the fates of three women coming together, trying to figure out life. That never escaped me, that kind of giggle at life, and how we've all kind of had to transcend the same patterns and themes. And we can see that in different parts. Some people might call that ancestral karma, or, breaking a cycle or whatever. But I've worked really hard on my relationships with my family. I chose to be here to support them, and they chose to be here to support each other. And I definitely see a theme of overcoming health struggles, of overcoming abuse, of trying to find our own voices and speak them, of having this fine line between being resourceful and also welcoming of help. And so I see that definitely in my own life, where we are mirroring each other's hurts, we're experiencing similar threads of pain, that it brings us together and it pulls us away. And so I think that's a part of the fate that we co-created when we wanted to come into this life. We wanted to experience this level of grief. We wanted, I believe that it was fated that my mother and I are having conversations about what it's like to die, but not die. I think that's assisting both of our souls. I think that, there's all reason and rhyme for that, and that nothing is really a mistake. It might feel like one. We might wish it were one so it can get fixed, but yes, absolutely. And even, I've mentioned my partner in this. We are the family that we each other chose. And, our deep conversations about views and spirituality and life, and especially things like critical thinking, that elevates our consciousness together. Whether or not he would choose to use those words, not in my hands, but I choose that. I recognize that. So the beings that, when we choose to come together and truly participate in life, we will notice those themes, that he and I had similar upbringings, that both of our families dealt with health, that we were both devoted to spirituality and God. Even when I sit down with you, we find commonalities with one another. So, it's not just through family, but yes, there's this cosmic DNA of soul encounters that, gets overlaid into our fate lines, into our life.
We learn so much because of that. Thank you for that answer. Do you agree that each person is born with their own inner medicine, and the deep golden self can be seen to carry the antidote for what truly ails us in life?
Yes, and I would add that it is my deep belief that we cannot be our own superheroes, and that some of those beings that I spoke of before are versions of the superheroes that we need to reflect back to us the things that we might not be able to do for ourselves or support ourselves in. So we absolutely have the medicine within ourselves, but I want to enhance this essence of connectivity that we have with other humans, with other divine beings, with other states of consciousness like the fates, where there's an exchange. We can't all be our own superheroes. Sometimes the medicine needs to be reflected into us to be able to see the pool of nourishment that we truly do have.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because it definitely needed to be stated. And I can vouch for that. Although it's interesting, because I've interviewed some people on here that said they have never, well, I shouldn't say that they, the one had a Kundalini experience. So, but she said she's really never gone to outside sources in quite that way. So it's interesting just to hear everybody's different journeys and approaches to something like this question. So in closing, in refusing fate, we lose our destiny, and we fail to find coherence in ourselves and in the world. As Mead states, all of us are doing time. We do time when we grieve a loss or lose our way. School can feel like a prison to young people, and many jobs have an incarcerating effect. Marriage can feel delightful, yet also feel like a life sentence. And even a spiritual path can feel like an isolated condition. And illness can entrap the soul as well as wreck the body. And the loss of a loved one can leave the body enshrouded for a long time. Anything that restricts the story of trying to live out of one's soul can feel like a prison. Megan has shown us today that acting from one's deepest essence, awakening the uniqueness of one's soul, a person can alter the darkest aspects of fate. Amidst all she has been traversing, her golden seed, divine inheritance, has been mined in darkness and in the depth of her heart and soul. The final questions to ask yourself after listening to this presentation are: while you had your chance to live, did you become your true self? Having received the gift of life,
Did you learn the nature of your gifts and their purpose? And what is the meaning in your life? Thank you very, very much. This has been a pleasure, and the information where people can email you will be included with our video. And I hope you have an absolutely exquisite and beautiful rest of your day, and am in such gratitude to you for sharing all that you've shared.
Thank you. So grateful to be here with you.
Thank you, dear sweet.